Welcome to the It All Asterisk podcast, hosted by me, Jena, with Brandee and Sarah, a show where we'll explore whether or not you can actually have and do it all. We dive into the power of embracing the asterisks of life as a leader, mom, wife, and friend by redefining what it really means to have and do it all. Every week, we untangle real-life conundrums, laugh at the absurdities, and share insights on how to discover what you really want and do what you really love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the It All Asterisk podcast. So happy to be here today. I wrote a newsletter that I sent to my group in early December, and it was all about a topic that I wanted to share here. It resonated with so many on my mail list. I had so many people respond, and I just figured some of our listeners will probably resonate with them as well. So I wanted to share this. 3 months ago, I was in Greece and I was traveling for a wedding, and we decided to go to a couple of different places to have a lot of fun while we were over for the wedding. And I ended up starting feeling really miserable on the trip. And it started, I'll spare like a lot of the details, but it started quite mild. But very quickly, it was escalating into like really not feeling well, to the point where I was having a hard time enjoying what was going on around me. And we were in amazing places, enjoying amazing things. And so it was really a struggle for me. And it finally escalated. I went to go see the doctor at the airport before flying to Santorini. And then while I was in Santorini, I started getting like, not only was I not feeling well, I started getting really physically sick, to the point where I was like crying and really feeling sorry for myself in the bathroom, honestly. Like,
I would have been too.
Great resort. And all I'm seeing is the view of the toilet, like not awesome. So I came out, and my husband, of course, woke up. He was like, why don't you just go to the doctor, go to the hospital? And I'm like, I don't know, like, should I go to the hospital? There was just all this like drama inside of me. So I did end up calling the emergency room, and they were like, yeah, it sounds like you need to come in like now. So like, get here, we got a bed for you. And as I look back on this, I giggle because this is not my first international hospital that I've gone to. I've been really sick on trips before, but I like have this fear of going to a hospital in another country. And it's not because I think I won't get the care that I need. It's like, how am I going to pay? They're not going to take my insurance. Like, what's going to happen? There's like all of these questions. And meanwhile, I'm so sick, but these things are like keeping me from figuring it out. Like, what are they going to do? They're going to send me a bill if I can't pay it. Like, logically, it all makes sense. But illogically, I'm doing like these mental gymnastics to handle not feeling well and to put off getting the care that I need. And so that fear is like really unfounded. And again, this is not the first time this has happened in my life. This has happened multiple times. And I still run this idea that I don't know what's going to happen. They're going to keep me locked up in their hospital until I can pay the bill. They're going to get rid of me. Like, again, it just makes no sense. But it's this thing that I call the pain threshold change, right? It's like the pain has to get so bad that it will then create the change that I need to create in my life. So I wanted to talk about this because I'm sure we all do this in our lives. When we were talking a couple of weeks ago about goals, I think this is like one of the reasons we see people make change in their lives. I'll give an example. My dad had a heart attack when he was 50 and he smoked. He didn't stop smoking until he had the heart attack. So we have to go through these like pretty awful things to get to change. And so I wanted to talk about that today. So I wanted to, first of all, just check in with you guys. What are you seeing in this? Do you experience this? Do you also have a crazy, unfounded fear of international hospitals?
I don't think I have a fear of international hospitals, probably because I just haven't traveled internationally for a really super long time. So maybe if I had been traveling more internationally recently, I might have a fear of that for sure. And not because the hospital itself is a scary thing, but it's the system. Like, how do we do this? How much is it going to cost? Like, it's just another level of stress for sure.
I don't know if I have a fear of international hospitals. I've never really thought about that. I guess it would depend on where we're talking. There was one time where I thought I might have to go to the ER, and I can't remember if we were in the Dominican or Mexico, but I was not going. If I were in Greece, I think I'd be okay to go. But my fear when I'm traveling internationally is usually I'm afraid of the language barrier. I only speak English, and I feel like everybody else kind of speaks English too, but I've run into situations where they don't necessarily want to accommodate that to help you solve a problem. So I'm not sure how I would react if I were really sick somewhere. Obviously in Mexico or the Dominican, I just feel like that's different. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I kind of asked that question in jest, right? Because it's silly. And, where else in your life might you be where that pain has to go so high in order to do this simple thing? And I think we all experience that at some level. But it really got me thinking, because after coming back from the trip, I was like, that was so stupid to spend like 4 days, like miserable. Like I was out on this boat. Yeah. We were out all day. We were out on this like 10-hour private cruise. It was amazing. And I felt so miserable, like just so miserable. Yeah. And that probably wouldn't have changed, because literally it all started that morning. Of course, I was going on this boat ride. It was expensive and it was amazing. And I was going from hell or high water.
I'm gonna do this.
I didn't care if I was puking off the side. I'd be like, oh yeah, I get seasick, whatever it is. But the next day and the next day, I let it go until I got so sick that I was like, I can't, like, honestly, the thing that really drove me to going to the hospital was like, I'm like, in 2 days, I'm getting on a 10, 11-hour flight.
Yeah.
I cannot feel like this on a flight. And that was the thing that finally got me to pick up the phone. And it's funny, right? Why did I pick up the phone and call? Like, it's an emergency room. They don't need me to call.
Are you open? Just checking to see what are your hours?
But I think it's such a great example of like, I honestly think I wanted the woman on the phone to say, you know what, you're going to be fine. Just stay in your hotel. You're going to be okay.
Drink some water.
Yeah. And of course, that's not what they're going to say to me from a liability perspective. But honestly, it's like you do these weird things because I'm trying not to go there. I'm trying not to have to do the uncomfortable thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this happens a lot with people with medical stuff. I mean, you're talking about medical stuff, right? But I'm also thinking about once when I went to get my mammogram, I was in the waiting room and there was a woman there who was really nervous. And, she was telling me the story about how she had found a few different lumps, and her son was getting married. So she didn't want to address it at that point, and so she had waited 4 months, and then here she was coming in to get it, checked out. And I think it happens a lot with medical stuff where it's just so hard. It's so scary to think once I get this news, my life could change drastically. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to know that. I think people may know it subconsciously, right? Like if something's really wrong with your body, you know that. But once you get the official word, now you've entered into a completely different category.
Right. Yeah, a different reality.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Not just with medical things. I think anything in life that we don't want to face, right?
Yeah.
A problem in our marriage, a problem with a friend. I've watched some people ignore things going on with their kids for long time because they just either didn't know how to face the issue or didn't want to be the person with, it's a lot easier to have a kid that parties a little than to have a kid in rehab.
Yeah.
I think this comes up in life over and over again in many different forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, I think times when I have shied away from looking at something that's hard, it's because I don't know if we can come back from it.
Right.
Not in a situation where somebody's life or health is in danger, but like in a relationship.
Sure.
If we go there, can we come back?
Right.
All my training says, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. But can you really? Can you really? And will it be worth it to name that truth or say that thing or, push that concern a little bit farther? So at one point when our kids were much, much younger, there would be issues in our marriage. And I had a mantra in my head, like, choose sleep, meaning like, just don't bring it up. Just don't bring it up right now. Just go to sleep and tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah. Hey, listeners, on the show, we share a lot of ourselves and we talk about things that are important. Make-A-Wish is really important to me. The reason that I believe so strongly in this organization is the difference that they make in the lives of not only children, but families of children that are facing critical illness. It is incomprehensible to me that with where we are medically, we still have over 70 kids every single day in the United States that are diagnosed with a critical illness. Make-A-Wish isn't always about a crazy experience for a child. I think everybody knows without a doubt that Make-A-Wish sends kids to Disney, and that's great. But they also do things like backyard makeovers and fishing trips, all different experiences to fulfill the wishes of these kids that are just carrying the weight of so much more. So anyway, I'm asking for your support. If you are willing to give, I sure would appreciate it. We will post a link in the show notes directing you directly to my fundraising page. No pressure, but I would certainly love your support.
I mean, it is so interesting, right? And I think the questions that you guys are asking, I called this episode, What Are You Tolerating?
Yeah.
You guys brought up the question, like, what are we ignoring? I did a workshop on this a few years ago, particularly around leadership and what we're ignoring in our leadership, what we're tolerating in our leadership of our people. And this woman on there, she said, we did this like exercise. We came back and they were sharing. And she said some really profound things. And then she goes, another thing that showed up on my list that I just wasn't expecting is I'm tolerating my living room furniture. She's like, I hate it. I have the means and the money to go buy new, and I just don't do it. And then I don't want to invite people over because I hate my living room furniture, and that's where we go sit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. Right. So to your point, it can be about anything. It could be these little things that living room furniture keeping us from building connection and doing things that are meaningful in our lives that we don't even really consciously maybe connect or really think about it. Cause she was like, I did not make that connection until you had us do this exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's really cool. Right. And that's what I wanted for our listeners and for us on this episode, especially in this new year, as we start looking at our lives differently, right? Is like, what are we tolerating in our lives? What are we ignoring? What are we not willing to admit? And really taking a look at those things to see if we're willing to. And in some cases, we may not be, and it's totally okay, right? We may wait out that pain change threshold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in other places like living room furniture, it's like, well, yeah, I can make that change pretty darn easily. What do you hear in those questions for yourselves or just generally in the world?
I think it's so, so, so true. I fall victim to, I'll just come up with a workaround. If I don't completely understand how to use, like one of my goals for 2024 was to update my systems to become more proficient, more efficient in my business. And I did that. But now I have new apps that I'm using and I find the workaround, but I probably could do it more efficiently and simpler. But I just want to get the thing done and I don't want to work on the process. So then that becomes something I tolerate. And it's a few seconds, it's a few seconds here, a few seconds there, but it's the brain space because every time I do it, I'm like, I bet there's an easier way of doing this. There's got to be an easier way of doing this, but I don't want to figure out how to do it in that moment because I want to get my invoice sent or whatever it is,
Sure.
I can't think of anything specific right now. 2024 coming out of it was just a weird year for me. So I think if I really spent some time in this, I could come up with a pretty long list of things that I tolerated, ignored, didn't deal with, which isn't really my nature. I think there was a lot of overwhelm for me last year and has been really for a couple years. So it's been, I don't know, I felt like I'm swimming through mud, if that makes sense. So
completely.
A lot of things, both personal, professional, from every angle.
Yeah.
So this is a good conversation for me. I just unfortunately don't have, a ton to offer, I guess.
No, I think like the willingness for the reflection is where the gold is at, right? Because I mean, it was so interesting writing this newsletter. I've been doing like I've just started this and this newsletter, I got like over 10 responses from the people like, oh my gosh, we're going through this in our organization right now, things that we've been tolerating and we're really wanting to move away from that. Personally, I got people responding back about what they were tolerating. It's such an interesting conversation to be had and to be looking at because there is so much. I mean, right now I'm in the middle of painting my kitchen cabinets. So if you see some paint on me in these videos, know that I'm no longer tolerating the color of my cabinets in my kitchen, and I'm taking action.
Yeah.
And I've lived in this house I moved in here so 7 years. I had to do some math there. And the cabinets are nice looking. And it's interesting. I have someone that came out to the house and she was like, oh, let's change out your cabinets. I'm like, no. I like these cabinets, even though I don't.
Yeah.
But I was willing to tolerate them in that moment. And I was like, no, what I like about the cabinets is they are very well built. Yeah. They're really sturdy. They're not like cheap, old cabinets that you see. That's what I like about them. But I did not like the color. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't like the color wasn't so much the color, even though kind of it is, because it was not, they were like a maple color. We'll do an episode in my kitchen once I have it all painted. But definitely not now. But looking at it, I didn't not like the color, but I didn't like the darkness of my kitchen. My kitchen is really dark. It has like dark countertops. The backsplash is like cream with the color of the counters mixed in there. But it always feels like really dreary. Like even if it's a beautiful sunny day out, I just don't get a lot of sun in there. And so it automatically feels darker. And right now at this point in time, I only have my uppers painted. I don't even have the doors back on. And every time I walk in, I'm like, oh, this is incredible. Like it is really
nice.
Such a difference.
Nice.
And I look back and even my husband said, and he's not real big on like home improvement projects. Like he doesn't like he doesn't usually speak to the difference it makes for him. But every time he's like, this is such a difference. Like, I can't wait to see it done. And I'm like, yeah, why did
That's
we
awesome.
tolerate this for so long?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it shows up in big decisions too. Like I think it was the last episode we did, I talked just briefly about the regret of staying in some situations too long, and I was tolerating those situations because I thought they might get better. I'd
Yes.
hoped that they might get better. So I think there's also a conversation to be had around what is your motivation for tolerating something, and what does your how you were brought up, or what does your for me it's your religious background. It's like the idea Jesus saying turn the other cheek. It was so helpful for me when I learned that was actually a form of nonviolent resistance, and not a way of saying, you can walk all over me. Like, that's a pretty amazing flip, because most of the time it's been preached on or understood or just at face value. It looks like it's about being somebody else's shock absorber, but really it was nonviolent resistance. But so what's the motivation for the toleration? Like, I think, is it that I'm too busy? There have been times when I've tolerated things just because I'm too busy. Sometimes it's because what you're saying, Brandee, it's the overwhelm, and I don't have bandwidth to deal with this if I'm also dealing with that. Has some crisis arisen in the life of somebody I do life with? Well, now I've got to shift, and things I would love to be checking off the list. Like, I love checking things off the list, and I'm not always able to do that. And so then you shift into that space of, I'll tolerate this for now. And when we get more stable, then we can come back to this.
We can work with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think what you brought up about understanding the motivation to tolerate is such a valid point. I had an experience recently. Years ago, I was part of a board for a nonprofit that was made up of incredible people who were just very resistant to leadership, which was weird because they were board members, but they really wanted to be told what to do. And that was a hard experience for me as the president of that board, because I felt like this should not all fall on me, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I more recently was involved in another organization, not as the president of the board, not even on the board, but as a chair of a committee, where I started seeing this same type of behavior. And I just bailed because I'm not willing to tolerate that again. My circumstances are different. My commitment to this particular organization wasn't as strong. So I do think there are a lot of factors that influence what we'll tolerate and what we won't. I mean, I don't think it would shock either of you to know that I would describe myself as pretty intolerant, but there are circumstances where I will tolerate a lot, as a leader professionally.
Yes.
So many times I had to stand by and watch someone do things that I completely disagreed with, knew they shouldn't be doing, but gave them the space to learn their own lessons. And in the course of that, I had to accept, tolerate, however you describe it, things that I knew were wrong. One of the managers that worked in my organization, he and I would go round and round because he didn't want his people to make any mistakes. Well, as a result, they couldn't function without him. And I used to tell him all the time, you have to be more tolerant. You have to be able to allow them. They're only going to grow if they have some failures. Of course, we never want to set anyone up for long-term failure, but that's part of growth in both your professional and your personal life. So I think watching your kids, same thing. We tolerate a lot from our kids, because we're focused on the end game, not how they act as an 11-year-old or whatever the case.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I love this distinction about understanding the motivation, right? Because as I'm listening to you, Brandee, talk about these situations, of course, we tolerate a lot more in the name of growth, in the name of development.
Yeah.
And coming back to the hospital situation, it's like the motivation is fear, right?
Yeah.
And that's a hell of a lot different than I'm going to tolerate this for growth versus like I'm tolerating this because I'm scared. And so seeing that distinction, Sarah, I think that's such a beautiful part of this, right? Because we all will have things that we tolerate at times.
Yeah.
The question is slowing down to see, like, do I want to tolerate this and why am I tolerating it?
And what am I going to do with the discomfort that comes with tolerating it? So as a solopreneur, you know, when you are putting your ideas out there, you know, you're pitching for opportunities, you will not get 100% of everything you go after. And like yesterday, I had a day where it was like, oh, God, I'm getting the no thank yous more than I'm getting the, yeah, we're gonna jump on board and do this with you. And I was like, oh. And I knew I could be in that space of, dang it anyway, like farts in a bucket. I could be in that for like an afternoon. But if I'm going to be successful as an entrepreneur, I get to kind of be upset about it for an afternoon. That's it. Then I got to like regroup, and tomorrow is another day. And I got to, what can I learn from that? And I got to keep reaching out, keep pitching, keep doing the things. And our conversations has helped me regroup more quickly, honestly. So thank you both for that, because it was like, nope, you just keep doing the right things. You do the right steps. And I think of the saying, run steady. You know, you just run steady. Yeah. Because I want to be like, yeah, victory. Woohoo! We got it. I want to celebrate. I love good times. Celebrate good times. I want to do that. Like, I want that adrenaline rush. And, you know, you got to run steady. Because if you're going to be high, you're going to also feel like low at some point. You won't get 100% of things that you go after.
Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up? Because I think this is like amazing. I think it's such a great start in terms of really looking at these questions, looking at these ways of being, and really questioning, okay, like I said, again, especially because of the new year, it's like, oh, is there a place where I could just like take that thing that I'm tolerating and move it a little bit? Or I'm going to tolerate that again at this cost. You know, Sarah, to your point, and Brandee, to your point as well, because I think you were both saying that in a little bit different way. It's like, am I willing to do this?
I would add, if you have an idea for one tiny tolerance that you can fix, what is it?
Yeah.
So I have a tiny tolerance that I can easily fix. It'll take me about 90 seconds. And it's pulling out all of our water bottles and the displaced caps that have all gotten jangled up. And I am going to, you know, get them matched up. And then I'm going to throw out the ones that do not have the lid, because I like throwing stuff away.
Beautiful. I love that. I think that's so great. And such a great example of these little things that we tolerate because like we don't have the time or we don't think we have the bandwidth to do it, and can make us feel so good. Like going back to the episode where we were talking about cleaning out our closets, right? And creating that space. So really beautiful. Well, with that, let's get this thing wrapped up. Consider, what are you tolerating? What are you ignoring? What are you not willing to admit? Take a look at this for a few moments and see what you see, and see if you want to make some decisions maybe before the pain change threshold kicks in and forces that change on you. With that, we love having you here. We enjoy spending time with you. We look forward to seeing you on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and on this video. Leave a review. We will see you next time. It was great to have you here with us today on the It All Asterisk podcast. Please subscribe or follow us to get our latest episodes. And don't forget to leave a review. Remember, when you embrace the asterisks, you shift your mindset and ease your heart.